grateful. I just finished watch, so I'm. Thank you guys for joining. Hi, Carola. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Kerry.
It's good to see you.
It's good to see you.
Uh,
It's good to see you.
I don't watch the film often. And I have resisted watching it a lot. So it was like such a ride to watch it in this moment.
Yeah, yeah. And, as you remember, we came along with some of the mothers of Say Her Name to see it when you were doing it on Broadway.
So
So I hadn't seen it
let me
since then.
let me introduce everybody to you. For those of you
Yes.
who don't know who the extraordinary Kimberly Crenshaw is, so a lot of people have heard the term. Hi, Takesha, I see you. A lot of people have heard the term intersectionality, intersectional. Kimberly Crenshaw coined that term. She invented that idea, or the language for it. She's an incredible lawyer and civil rights advocate and scholar and philosopher. But also she's the founder. I'm so happy I have some notes here because my brain, after watching, I just love you so much. Thank you for doing this, Kimberly. She's the founder of the African American Policy Forum, which is the leading authority in civil rights, Black feminist legal theory. And this group is the group behind Say Her Name. So if you have heard us, particularly in these days, talking about Breonna Taylor, but talking about Sandra Bland, talking about Corinne Gaines, if you've heard that term Say Her Name, it's because of Kimberly Crenshaw and his mothers that she has been working with, the mothers of the women whose lives have been taken by police. So Kimberly brought the mothers to the play, and we got to talk afterward. And it was such a gift to me because I felt like my job was to honor them and to try to embody the nightmare that they were living. And so to have them there and to get their blessing and to have them share um, how they saw themselves in this performance was so affirming. And I think important for people to know that this is the nightmare you're being dropped into. You're being invited into Black women's nightmare, Black mothers' nightmare.
Yeah, yeah. And as I watched your performance again, I, I wondered what it did to you and what you had to do to go there every night. I mean, it's one thing to do it for the film, but you had to go there absolutely every night. And just sitting with that, I was interested and I was compelled to ask as an artist, what do you have to do to touch that pain? And then having touched it, how that shaped your interaction, the time that you sat with those mothers who live that pain every day.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting is that even though I've come to realize that at the start of the play, Jamal is already dead when the play begins, if you look at the timeline. But Kendra doesn't know that. She has a deep fear that that is the case, but for me, I thought a lot in playing her that she felt like she was stuck in somebody else's nightmare, like this
Oh,
happening to me. And I think that fantasy, that nightmare is just intrinsic in Black motherhood. I think it's part, like when I look back at the scandal years and why, even when I got pregnant, Shonda refused to let Olivia Pope be pregnant. And back on that, I think a lot of that is because Olivia Pope was like a superhero and
mhm.
she was so powerful. And woven into Black motherhood is a sense of powerlessness and fear.
Yes. And
Have,
and how would those two things,
yeah, how would
yeah,
it navigated
yeah,
the powerlessness, the given fear and powerlessness of being a mother of a Black child?
yes, yes.
Um, but I really want to know how it came to be that you started working with these mothers.
Yeah.
and how Say Her Name came to be
Yeah,
specifically.
yeah. So, I think it builds very much off of the powerlessness that you mentioned as a Black mother, because there's a constant fear of the loss. What I like very much about the adaptation is that you actually showed the dreaming and the worrying and the not being able to sleep. And you really embodied that. And I think all Black mothers actually experience that. And then on top of that is what we call the loss of the loss. So the
Mm,
mothers of Say Her Name have, like the mothers of many of the men killed by the police, the Tamir Rices and the Eric Garners, they've experienced that loss. But the significance of that loss is also lost.
right.
When we started bringing them together, and I have to give special love to Fran, the mother of Michelle Cusseau, Fran Garrett, because she's the one that really was the inspiration that got us started. It was around the time that Mike Brown was killed. And many of us were protesting around Mike Brown. And Michelle Cusseau was killed within weeks of Mike Brown's death. She was killed in a pickup order for a mental health call. And one police officer, there's almost always one, who
Mm,
decides that this woman isn't going to tell him that they can't come in, and he climbs over the vestibule, the fence, and encounters her. And just because of the look on her face, she said nothing. The look on her face made him think his life was in danger, and so he shot her through the heart. While Fran was on the phone
oh,
trying to talk to the police officers,
oh,
and this is not the only case where someone has been on the phone trying to talk, to the person who the police are about to shoot. This happened with Corinne Gaines.
yes.
Rhonda Dormius was on the phone. Her therapist was on the phone. They said, we'll call you when we need you. So basically, they weren't about trying to save this woman's life. What they were about is coercive law enforcement, mental health issues, look like law enforcement issues. Minor traffic violations look like law enforcement issues. All of these deaths started with things that were nonviolent, that did not warrant this ultimate death penalty, yet the situation devolved to the point that a life was taken. So that's the loss. But then no one talks about that loss.
Right.
So Fran took her daughter's coffin to City Hall.
Whew.
That's when we learned about what happened.
It's like,
Then we realized, you know what? None of these names are being called in the marches that we're going to. So in the next march, we went with a poster with Fran's daughter's name on it and many of the others that we could find. And as we were marching, we were saying, say her name. Say
mm,
her name. Here's the name.
right.
Say it. And at that point, it became clear to us that a lot of people didn't know. So some people were just shocked, like, this happens to
It's
women too.
happening. Yeah.
And some people were annoyed. This is a man's issue. This is a Black man's issue. What are you guys doing interloping in this issue? And that's when it became clear that this couldn't just be a chant. It had to be more than that. So we made it into a hashtag to hold some of these stories. We pulled the mothers together for the first time. And that was more or less the beginning of the Say Her Name Mothers Network. We pulled the families together to see each other and to say those names, to tell those stories.
Um, it's so powerful that you are doing that because I could feel that in the community of being with each other, they could fill the well of some of that loss because they could
Mm-hmm.
other and some healing together. But
Mm-hmm.
how do we do more? How do we, I mean, first of all, I want to let everybody know, in case you don't see it, we are fundraising for the African American Policy Forum. So tell us where that money goes. Tell us how that will support making sure that these names are said. But what else? What else can be done
Yes.
in the
Yes.
justice and
So much. So one of the most important things that we do with the mothers is that we pull them together to provide the opportunity for them to see that life actually still is worth living, that they can still find joy and they're not abandoning the memories of their daughters. Actually, they are renewing themselves when they're together. We've seen the impact of the stress. One of our mothers, Vicky McAdory, the auntie mama of India Beatty, we are convinced died because of the stress, because of the broken heart, because of the loss of the loss. So it's really important to find these opportunities for affirmation. And many of the mothers say that they can touch each other and see and feel each other in a way that even close friends and family members can't, because no one has experienced that particular pain.
That's
We also are now coming to recognize that siblings are also experiencing something similar but different. And we're reaching out and trying to make the space for them. But most importantly, we're trying to find new ways of telling the stories, new ways of galvanizing attention for the kind of reforms that are necessary to interrupt this cycle of violence. So one of the things that we've done is we've created, out of the interviews and experiences with the mothers, a play called Say Her Name, The Lives That Should Have Been. And we try to imagine what life would have been like if those reforms that are in place that we're calling for had happened on the day that these women lost their lives. And so it's sort of a split reality where the daughter tells the story of when she almost died, while the mother is telling the story of the day that she did die. And it's basically both a way of telling people, helping them hold the fact that something so monumental as the loss of a life can turn on something as small as who picked up the mental health call and got sent out, right?
When we talk about policies, like what are the policies that we need to be fighting for and advocating for? There's a lot of talk about defunding, which scares people.
It does.
I read just recently online, like defunding the police is scary until you realize we've been defunding education for decades.
And healthcare and housing. So all of the circumstances where police are called in to handle issues that are not about law enforcement. They're about social control. They're about dealing with social problems. And many of these problems are the consequence of the voracious appetite of police. It's the only area, police and military spending, and these days they're pretty much the same. It's the only thing where there's no limit. You need it, you got it, we'll write an open check for it. In the meantime, those resources are coming out of things like mental health training, mental health services. They're coming out of services for homeless. I mean, we have homeless because we don't have resources for everyone to have shelter, and police get called to deal with that. So one thing after another, right? There are all of these ways that the concentration of our services, our resources for policing services, takes away some of the support that then turns into moments where the police are the ones that get called. So basically, number one, taking police out of the rotation for mental health, other kinds of domestic, other ways of handling that, to just like everything looks like a nail to a hammer, everything looks like a law enforcement issue to a police officer. So some of it means taking that out. But then there are other really important things. Reducing the immunity that cops have for killing people. So Rhonda Dormius, the mother of Corinne Gaines, they something unimaginable happened. They actually won a wrongful death case. It almost never happens. A judgment of more than $34 million. The judge overturned it because of qualified immunity. So Corinne's children, her son, who was actually at the shooting, was himself shot by the police officer, will have a disability for the rest of his life, gets nothing. The rest of her children get nothing. It's basically a statement about the value of Black mothers to their lives. It's basically nothing. We owe you nothing for taking away your mother's life. So qualified immunity actually creates this open season where there really are no significant concerns that a police officer has to worry about. That's why 99% of the killings don't really result in anything, and the very few that do are subject to reversal, like the case of Corinne Gaines.
Talk to me about no-knock warrants.
Oh, so no-knock warrants are that's what led to Breonna Taylor's death. So just imagine, you're in your home, you're sleeping, you hear suddenly someone busting down your door, and they're not dressed as police officers. You have no reason to think that what isn't happening to you is a home invasion. So if you are a person who exercises your Second Amendment right to protect yourself, you will pick up your weapon and try to defend yourself. But if it turns out that those people who busted down your door happen to be police officers, then you could be accused of attempted murder of a police officer, and anyone they kill is basically going to be seen as collateral damage. So much collateral damage that if you get killed in a mistaken police raid, the police don't, not only do they not apologize, they don't pay for the final services. They don't try to compensate for the loss of life. It's like, oh, my bad. And they just walk away. This is what no-knock warrants allow. The constitutional standard that the Supreme Court has accepted is minimal. It's the same standard of reasonableness that warrants a cop pulling somebody over walking down the street, right? So these are things that can be changed at a higher level, but they really require a concerted effort, number one, to know how the constitutional law has been created by the court that basically allows police to do this, allows police to use race.
With no accountability.
No accountability. So, you know, the Supreme Court issues have they're distant to people. It's like, that's not quite as immediate as I need. I want to go and write my check for something now. Well, it's important for people to realize that the court set the rules that determine what police are able to do. We've got to change those rules. And that requires us to have a concerted effort to change who sits on that court.
So what does that mean, fighting for that kind of systematic structural change? Well, first I want to say Breonna's law just passed, yes?
Yes.
That's huge. And that's a huge victory because everybody who has been calling, has been sending letters, you know, we all celebrated Breonna's birthday last Friday and by asking, but those officers are still out there, right? They're still
and nothing has happened to them. And let's face it, let's have a hard conversation about this. Breonna was killed March 13th. March 13th. We as a country, didn't hear about it for at least 6 weeks, and that's probably on the shorter side.
Right.
And the reason why we heard about it and the reason why her name is being lifted is because there were these other deaths that had happened at the same time, right? But let's be honest about this. More people knew about and were upset about what happened with Christian Cooper and Amy Cooper in Central Park, which they had a right to. We should have been upset about that. I'm not undermining our outrage about that at all. But I could tell myself when I tweeted something about Breonna Taylor, you know, some people said something. When I tweeted something about Amy Cooper, viral. So what is that telling us about the frames that we have, right? We don't know what to do when the Black body that's killed by police or that's put in jeopardy by police is a Black woman's body. We recognize it when it's our brother's body, and we stand up and we come running. It's time for us to come running for our sisters too. It's time to come running for our daughters and our mothers, because, you know, people who are crying for them and are grieving for them aren't grieving any less for them than they are for their brothers and their fathers. So we've got to look deep and say, are we ready to ride in the way we need to for our sisters?
It's so it's so heartbreaking to me because it just speaks to the way that we don't allow Black women to be fully human. The resistance that we have in culture to honor the lives of Black women. You know, it's like, it's why for me, you know, when I put myself at the center of a narrative, when I choose a project like Little Fires or Confirmation or American Son, the idea of like making you see us, making you spend time with us. I mean, since Save the Last Dance, it was like, okay, I'm going to take this teen mom, but I'm going to make you see her.
Mm.
And it's hard for you to see us. Like what?
And that has political consequences. It
Yeah.
has social, economic consequences. So when we fight about narrative capital of
Mhm.
Black women,
Narrative capital. Mhm.
the ability to actually generate and tell our own stories. We're not just fighting about, well, who gets a chance to be in front of the camera, who gets a chance to. We're talking about whether our lives have meaning to people, whether they can see them.
Yes.
Yes. You know, I
Yes.
was talking to Gina Best day before yesterday. She's the mother of India Kager. She's going to be featured on our next Intersectionality Matters. And I asked her what the reaction was to the killing of her daughter. Her daughter was killed when 16 police officers opened fire on a car that she and her 4-month-old child and his father were riding in. They knew the whole time that she was in that car as well as the child. She was not a person of interest in any way. They were totally aware of that. Yet they wanted to actually get him. And so she ended up being killed, and baby Roman survived. And I asked her, so were there protests? Was there outrage? Were people marching? What happened? Nothing. And I said, so why do you think that's the case? What were people thinking? I mean, this is a clear case. She said, people tend to ask when a woman gets killed, what did she do to get herself killed?
It's like rape culture.
And that's exactly what I said. Exactly what I said. And it's like, okay, we've seen this before. It's over here in rape culture.
Right.
But when it comes to police killings of Black women, there it is. Culture provides all the kinds of justifications, all the ways to try you first. How did you put yourself in that situation? And for Black women, there are many more ways of creating stereotypes that fill it in.
I want to say, because I see that a lot of people who are listening right now and with us are Black women. And so I want to acknowledge the loss for us too, that when they don't say her name, they also don't see us. And so take care of yourselves, everybody. Like, as we fight for justice, as we push these policies, as we donate to the African American Policy Forum, please do that. Every cent matters where you go. Also take care of yourself. Breathe, love yourself. Like Audre Lorde said, it is self-preservation. It is necessary for the movement. Like, we have to, if they are not seeing us, we have to see ourselves and see each other in love, right?
Yes. And you know, at the end of the day, Kerry, it is going to have to be us driving the love for us. And we can't be made to feel that loving ourselves is undermining our brothers. We can't be made to feel that we are somehow not holding up the interests of us all. We are part of the all.
That's
so
right.
If we don't write ourselves into this narrative, if we don't tell ourselves that our lives are important too, then what does it mean to say Black Lives Matter? Some Black Lives Matter? If all Black Lives matter, then we have to matter to ourselves. We have to be ready to come when the call goes out.
Yeah.
A sister is down you need to show up for her as a way of showing up for yourself.
Mm. Mm. Okay, so I want to be respectful of everybody's time, including yours. Give us some marching orders, right? Like what, because it's wonderful. Like, I'm so grateful that people watched American Son. So grateful that you have the courage to break your heart open, to see Kendra, to see the Jamals and the Kendras, to have this conversation. What else can we do?
Yes. Okay, starting from the top, say her name, right? So don't go to protests and allow the names of women to be drowned out. Don't go on television talking about the necessity for these bills and only mention the names of men, not even Breonna Taylor. Don't be in conversations in which we're talking about police abuse and the only thing that you can talk about are, 5 names of Black men. Loving our men, loving ourselves across the board. Second, be aware of, call your congressman, make sure this next bill goes through, and recognize it's just the beginning. There are many, many other things that need to be done. So yes, we need to pull back on this qualified immunity. Absolutely. Yes, we need to make sure that where there are body cams, they're there. Those are minimal, but they're still important. But there are other things. No Black person or any person who's been killed by the police should have to be the burden of their families to bury. No person who's killed in a police action should have to bear the cost of that. I mean, that's just not part of what's happening right now, and it needs to be. Number 3, we cannot let our candidates get away without answering to us. Yes. This is a real issue, and we need to make sure that they are accountable to that. So to do that, you have to learn, you have to know, make sure that when we tell ourselves to learn more about mass incarceration, about carceral strategies, that we read about how Black women are caught up in that as well. Yeah. So read, Dorothy Roberts, read Sarah Haley, read Ruth Ann Gilmore, read Marion Kaba. These are women who are in the battle, and we need to know how women are situated in that battle. And lastly, insist on telling the stories that show where we come into the picture. Going all the way back to 1619, let's tell the story about what slavery looked like for us. That's right. Sexual harassment, sexual abuse was a condition of work for us since we got here. Yeah. So what are the ways that that's carrying over into today, into the way our mothering is undermined, the way our sexuality is undermined? We've got to be able to tell a deeper story about how Black women are situated in this society in order to struggle for justice now. So find Black women authors, cite Black women, support Black women-led organizations. Yeah. So if you're gonna jump into say her name, keep going, keep going. Yes, there's some great organizations out there, but support the Black women-led organizations that have been there for Black women.
So I want to say 2 things based on what you said. One is there's been a lot of talk about what white people can do to have the difficult conversations, if you're at the table and you hear something. And I want to challenge us, even within our community and white people as well, to think about that charge of having difficult conversations and include people who are not obviously included in the conversation, right? Like, bring women into the conversation. It's not enough to just talk about the men. Bring trans folks into the conversation. If Black lives matter, then all Black lives
matter. Absolutely.
And I just want to say, like, it's so real, this idea of holding our representatives in it to be accountable. We forget that we pay them. Police officers, representatives, right. They're on our payroll.
They work for us. They work for us. But that's you're so right in that. And that's the challenge is to move from the ideology that they work for us to make that the reality. Because it's said they work for us, but let's look around. when the police showed us who they were. Like, you know that saying, when people show you who they are, believe them.
Maya.
When the police show you who they work for, believe them, and then make sure that you can fire them. Because the police over the last 3 weeks have shown us they're more concerned about bashing buildings than they're concerned about bashing heads.
Yeah,
If
that's
you are clutching your pearls over the fact that, oh my God, you know, people are rioting, and not absolutely appalled by what the police did when the world was watching them. If that doesn't like really show you what's going on, then you are living in an old idea about police, which was basically where it started, to protect white folks against us.
right.
Patty rollers, that's what they did.
That's right.
So there are elements of that still today in these conversations that we're having with our white allies. We need to actually make them see who the police are accountable to. And that is the crises in our democracy. And they need to be committed to actually unraveling that connection and make the police about enhancing the safety and security of all of us, and not basically protecting some people against the rest of us.
Kimberl Crenshaw, you are a national treasure.
Thank you, Kerry. Thank you so much. Thank you for the support that you've given to the mothers. Thank you for lifting us up. It was a beautiful opportunity for them to meet you. They're so excited. I'm giving a shout out to them all now because they're all there listening.
Love you.
And they love you.
Love yourself. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everybody, if you haven't donated, we'll keep the link alive. We'll put it in stories. Thank you for joining us. Ask yourselves before you log off, what more can I do? Every time you pick up your phone to do your Instagram, just challenge yourself to take one action before you scroll. Call your representative. Call the local chief of police in the town that still hasn't taken action on one of these nightmarish murders. You know, there are small actions that you can take throughout the day, and just make that the bridge between you and social. We're not going anywhere. My feed is going to be here. Your feed is going to be here. Take an action to make sure that you see yourself and that you allow all of us to be seen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Yes.